Good morning, everybody. Hello. My name is Christos Argeropoulos, and as a regional hub leader, I would like to say a few words for the new Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean regional hub of Watershed in Cyprus. So why do we need a regional hub of Watershed in Cyprus? We need the regional hub so we can build strong relations between the universities, local water authorities, and the organization, and other countries in the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean regions by organizing webinars and meetings in order to share knowledge and our innovation. The main activities of the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean Regional Hub will be in the following areas, uh, such as civil protection and occupational safety and health, smart policing and border control, cybersecurity, critical infrastructure protection, process safety, disaster resilience, health and water, with primary focus on antimicrobial resistance and pandemics. And after our small introduction, I would like today, which is a special day, is the Water Day. We have the honor to announce the creation of the regional hub and ask all of you to participate in this new effort of Services and Watershed. I will celebrate this event by organizing a webinar with great presenters from Morava Institute, Dr. Clive Lipsing, and Water Board of Nicosia, Mr. Konstantinos Parmaklis, and also and also from Watershed, Dr. Lydia Vamakeridou-Liroudia. Last but not least, I'm so grateful to the members of Serdes, my mentor, Professor George Boustras, my colleagues and friends, Cleo Variano Michelidou and Zoe Dorothea Paná, and Watershed members, Liz Andrews and Dr. Lydia Vamakeridou-Liroudia, for their trust and support to lead this effort. Thank you again, and now I will give the floor to George Boustras. Thank you.
Thank you, Christo. Thank you to everyone. Good morning, kalimera, bonjour, boker tov, buongiorno, everything, like in our area. We're very happy, as you said, to be here. And this is something that it is new for us in one way, but not so new in another way. As you know, and as our partners here and the people that are listening to us and they can see us now know, we have a plan. We have a plan, and our plan is to leverage upon regional collaboration. As everyone knows, we are not specializing, we are not focusing. Actually, the area that we're focusing is risk, with an emphasis on critical infrastructure, on safety, on security, climate change. And in this context, we believe that water infrastructure, it is also another area that can promote regional collaboration. We just 30 seconds before we started, we were having a chat with Clive, with Lydia. Clive is in Beersheba, Lydia is in Utrecht, in the Netherlands, and we were discussing about the temperature today. We thought that 28 degrees that we're going to have later on today, it is going to be high. Then Clive told us that it is going to be 32 in Beersheba. So, and Lydia told us that it is 9 degrees. So why am I saying all this? Because what I'm trying to show here is that regional collaboration in horizontal areas, horizontal axis, like security, like civil protection, like energy, like water. They are horizontal to everyone. What happens here today, it is going to happen tomorrow in Israel. It is going to happen the day after tomorrow in Jordan, and it is going to go down to the Gulf and all that. The world is so interconnected, and especially here. So for us, it is very important to use opportunities like this to create even more synergies between partners in the area. And we're going to continue doing this. This is a major aim for Serides. I'm not going to talk for too long. Lydia is going to talk about water share in a minute. I'm grateful. I'm grateful to Watershare and especially to the top management of Watershed, to Dragan Savic, to Lydia, to Lisa Andrews, to the very nice, friendly, and extremely professional people that we have met. And we have been collaborating now, as we remember, for a bit almost a year. I remember that I went to Utrecht just before not just before, 5 months before the pandemic. So it is a trip that I will remember for some time. So anyway, to cut a long story short, we have a great line of speakers today. And also, apart from the speakers that we have from abroad, we have an extremely professional and pivotal organization for Cyprus, the Water Board of Nicosia. Um, that is going to be represented by George Dimitriou, who's the technical manager, and hopefully, because it is World Water Day later on, we're going to have also the CEO or the director, I don't remember the exact title, Konstantinos Parmaklis. Okay, so I'm not going to talk for anymore. Enjoy World Water Day. Enjoy the day, and the floor goes back to Christos, who's going to pass it to Lydia, I believe.
Yes. So please, Lydia, we're ready for your presentation. And
Hello, everyone.
we're very happy that you are here again and to our new start.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm delighted to join Saridas for this event on World Water Day. I'm the director of Watershed, and I'm going to explain in a few minutes for people that don't know about it, what is Watershed? Watershed, the aim of Watershed. Sorry, can you see my screen? I hope so.
Yes, of course.
All right. So Watershed is a network, is a collaboration network with global expertise, which is transferred to local water challenges. So what we are doing is we're bringing together water research institutes, universities, utilities, dedicated to applying global expertise to master local water challenges for the whole water cycle. Within Watershed, members and experts collaborate, share knowledge, and develop science-based technologies which are brought into practice locally. So, Watershed focuses on bringing research to practice, collaboration, knowledge exchange, and most importantly, something we started recently, the regional hubs, to create impact locally. At the moment, we have 5 regional hubs. One is led by Saridas and focuses on Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. Then we have one for Latin America, which is being led by Argentina, AISA, a water utility in Buenos Aires. Then we have for Sub-Saharan Africa, led by South Africa, an umbrella organization there, the Water Research Commission. Then we have in China, led by Tsinghua, and for Netherlands and Flanders, led by KWR, which is a water research institute in the Netherlands and leading Watershed. And with this, I want to say that this first regional hub activity, as a regional hub, I mean with the label of a regional hub for Saridas. And I would like to thank George for organizing this. And also, I'm very glad that we'll start with this nice collaboration on the World Water Day. This is the Watershed team in KWR. And please feel free to contact us if we can help in any way. Thank you.
Lydia, for your very nice presentation. Of course, our audience at the end of all the presentation at the round table, they can have any questions that they have, and we'll be very happy to answer them. And now let's continue with the next presentation by Dr. Clive Lipsin from Anova Institute, Israel. Hi, Clive. Nice to have you here.
Hi, everybody. Hi, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited to participate in this first regional hub. So thank you very much for having me.
Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, so we're gonna. Okay, so I will give a presentation on how Israel, a water scarce country, has been able to evolve from a country that was dealing with very challenging water scarcity issues to a country that today, even though water scarcity is still a reality in our region, has been able to actually move from a situation of scarcity to a situation of meeting very clearly its water needs, and even in some respects having a surplus of water. Okay, so I also just want to briefly say that I represent the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies in Israel. The Arava Institute is a non-profit organization that was founded in 1996 as an academic and research organization. We work closely with the Ben Gurion University of the Negev as our academic partner, and we promote environmental projects not only in Israel, but in the Palestinian territories and in Jordan, and all across the Mediterranean, as well as having projects in other places, such as Africa, for example. We bring to our campus in the Arava region on Kibbutz Keturah students from Israel, Jordan, the Palestinian territories, and from all around the world, who come to our campus to study the shared environmental challenges that we face and to work together to promote shared environmental solutions. And on that same agenda, we also conduct a lot of our research and development projects. To begin, as I mentioned, the purpose of my presentation today is to provide you with an overview of how water is managed in our country, in Israel. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Whoops. Okay, we'll wait. Can you move to the next slide, please? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, go back one previous. Okay, stop there. Okay, so this is a map that just reflects the global reality of water scarcity in terms of what is called water stress, where under conditions of water stress, there is a difficulty in available water meeting current and future demand. And in this map, you can see that water stress covers all continents. And if anything, water stress is going to increase globally as the population grows and the demand for water grows. And exacerbating water scarcity, of course, is also the various climate change scenarios. The Middle East region and our part of the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean, is one of the world's most water scarce regions, where scarcity is a challenge for all the countries of the region. Again, because we are a region with a very fast growing population, climate change is already impacting our precipitation patterns. And so finding the best ways to adapt to this new reality is essential, not just for Israel, but for all the countries of the region. So this kind of webinar and these kinds of initiatives to promote cooperation is very welcome to address these issues. Okay, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so Israel is a very small country. We are no bigger than well, this is a US comparison. If you're familiar with the United States, we're no bigger than the state of New Jersey. From north to south, we are somewhere between around 450 kilometers from the northern part of Israel to the southern part of Israel. But even though we are a very small country, as you can see in the slide, we have a diversity of water resources in terms of its availability. So this is a hydrological map of the country in terms of annual precipitation in millimeters per year. And you can see that only in the very far north of the country do we get any kind of water supply of any amount that's reasonable. But you can see very quickly as we move from north to south along this hydrological gradient that by the time we get to the center of the country, we are looking at about 300 to 400 millimeters of rain per year. And in the desert regions of the country, which makes up 2/3 of Israel, and where I work and where our institute is based, we can drop to even less than 50 millimeters of rain per year. So precipitation is very limited in our region. And it's very extremely distributed on a spatial from a spatial perspective. In addition to that, we also have a very specific wet and dry season. We only have about 3 or 4 months when we can expect rain, and the rest of the year is dry. So one of the first challenges that Israel face with water management is how to overcome what we can call both spatial and temporal distribution challenges of water resources. And again, climate change is impacting this quite heavily. We're already seeing that annual average precipitation amounts are decreasing over time. Okay, next slide. So where is the water in terms of our natural water supplies? And this slide also relates to an additional challenge that we face, which is the transboundary issue. In other words, we share our very limited water resources with our neighbors. And so an additional element to water management for Israel is not just hydrological management or engineering, but of course, it's also developing water allocation agreements and mechanisms with our neighbors who also share and rely on the same water resources. So in this map, you can see, firstly, our only significant source of surface water, which is the Jordan River system. And the most important part of the Jordan River system for water is the Sea of Galilee, which is used by Israel as our only large significant surface water reservoir. And we pump from the Sea of Galilee through a national network to distribute that water around the country. This watershed is shared also and is used by Jordan, our neighbor to the east. And sources of water feeding the Sea of Galilee originate not just in Israel, but also in Syria and Lebanon. So it's a transboundary watershed in the sense that there are a number of countries that make up the basin. Second, and very important, and to some degree more important in terms of water supply than the Jordan River system, is our groundwater resources. So we have 2 main groundwater systems. The area highlighted in red is what we call generally the mountain aquifer system, which is a very important source of water that is recharged by rainfall. As you can see here, a big area of the recharge of the mountain aquifer system lies within the West Bank. So management of the mountain aquifer requires coordination between Israel and the Palestinian Authority that also depends on this source of water. And then our final source of fresh water is the coastal aquifer system. Now, this system is very vulnerable to overpumping due to its proximity to the sea. So overpumping of the aquifer will encourage seawater intrusion, and therefore the quality of the water decreases due to increasing salinity from the sea. This is an issue that is currently being faced in Gaza, where overpumping of the water in Gaza is creating seawater intrusion and a decline of water quality in the area. Okay, next slide, please. This shows you the challenge of water management in an area of scarcity. What you can see here is a hydrograph in terms of peaks of rainfall, but also valleys in terms of periods of drought. And so the way that Israel thinks about water management is not to manage water when we have it, but rather how do you manage water when you don't have it. And as you can see, as we predict out into the future, droughts are expected to become longer and more problematic because as we go into the future, again, with changing precipitation patterns, we're going to expect longer and longer droughts at the very same time as the demand for water is going to increase. So the challenge is, how do you overcome the fact that drought is a reality in our region, and it's a reality that is going to become more extreme over time. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is an attempt to relate to that point. Past and present projected Israeli water supply in million cubic meters. What you can see here is the Israeli Water Authority divides the country into different catchment basins. And every year a projection is made on how much water can be expected in each catchment basin based on the climatic conditions, specifically in terms of precipitation. Those projections, of course, are only assumptions based on how good our models are, our hydrological models. And as you can see, that in all the numbers that we come up with our projections, in reality, normally always have to be reduced when we actually have when we actually know how much water actually is in the system, as you can see here. So we can come up with projections, but those projections normally are skewed to be more optimistic than is actually what we face in reality. Over the last 17 years, the average amount of water that we were able to manage for our country was about 1.1 billion cubic meters of water per year. Over the last 2 years, and here we're talking about the years 2019, 2020, the average amount of water was actually less than 1 billion cubic meters of water per year. So we are seeing the national average of water supply decreasing over time. Okay, next slide. So this slide shows you what our challenges are with respect to water resources availability and water demand. So as you saw from the previous slide, we can expect when we have a good year of maybe getting just over 1 billion cubic meters of water per year. But water demand in Israel today is 2 billion cubic meters of water per year. So we are running a deficit in terms of natural water of close to 1 billion cubic meters per year. So the question, of course, is where does this extra water come from? How are we able to provide sufficient water resources when natural enrichment is not sufficient? Current potable water demand, so demand for fresh water, primarily for the domestic sector, is something of the vicinity of about 1.2 billion cubic meters per year. And this demand, of course, is going to grow as the population grows, as you can see there in the slide from 2020, to the year 2050. In addition to the potable water demands in Israel for the Israeli population, Israel is also required to provide water to Jordan and the Palestinians according to agreements. So the regional potable water demand is actually somewhat greater than what you see here in the slide. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the point that I want to address now is how do we close the gap? How do we actually overcome this significant deficit of somewhere around 1 billion cubic meters of water per year? And the way in which Israel addresses this deficit is in two ways. We have a water supply strategy and we have a water demand strategy. The water supply strategy, as I think many of you are probably familiar to some degree on this webinar, is desalination. So as you can see here, natural water supply is not expected to increase. If anything, it probably is going to decrease over time. And so Israel, already from the late 1990s, embarked on a process of what is called decoupling. What do I mean by decoupling? delinking itself from natural water supply and developing non-conventional water resources. And the most important non-conventional water resource for water supply is desalination. And so since the early 2000s, we have been increasing rapidly our desalination, which is helping us to meet the increasing water demand for potable water for the population. On the other hand, demand side management, this is very much focused on the water demand in the agricultural sector, because the agricultural sector is the largest consumer of water. This is something that is basically true for any country around the world. Food production is our most significant consumer of water. And the approach in Israel is to reduce as much as is possible natural water for irrigation, for food production, for agriculture, and to replace natural water with a recycled wastewater and also low quality brackish groundwater. So we have here a two-stage approach to moving beyond our dependence on fresh water. Desalination for water supply and recycled wastewater for the water needs for irrigation, for farming. And I will go into some detail on those two strategies. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here we see where the water is, the different sectors for water consumption. And as you can see here, that the agricultural sector is the most significant. About 57% of our demand for water comes from agriculture. And what you see here is that we manage that demand by providing today just over 50% of our water for irrigation through recycled wastewater and through brackish groundwater. And the idea is within the next decade or so to increase our reliance on what we can call non-conventional water for farming, and reduce significantly the need for fresh water for farming, for crop production. You can see here also the amounts of water that we provide to the Palestinians according to agreements. It's around 53 million cubic meters of water per year to the West Bank. Actually, that number has increased over the last couple of years. And the same with the Gaza Strip. Today, we actually provide about 10 to 12 million cubic meters of water to Gaza. And our water agreements with Jordan is around 51 MCM per year as well. You can also see on the left there at the bottom that we also try to allocate water to nature for the rehabilitation of natural systems. And here too, the opportunities are that we could improve our natural systems, our ecological systems, also through the introduction of recycled wastewater for rehabilitation of river systems that are also being impacted by drought and climate change. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the water demand forecast that brings us up to the year 2020. So this is the most current data that we have from the Water Authority. And you can see here how it's broken down according to agriculture industry, the urban sector, rehabilitation of aquifers, our commitments to our neighbors, water for nature, and total demand. So today we're dealing with just over 2,370 MCM, million cubic meters of water per year demand. And you can see that these figures include effluents, so water from treated wastewater, stormwater catchment, and brackish water for agriculture, all going to agriculture at around 500 MCM per year. So when we look at the water demand for agriculture in the year 2020, close to 50% of that water demand is being made up by non-conventional water supply. Okay, next slide, please. And these are our water resources. So this is the supply that meets the demand from the previous slide. And again, you can see here in terms of water reuse that we are at about 550 MCM per year water reuse. Brackish water desalination is around 70. But the most interesting point here in this slide is if you look at seawater desalination. So seawater desalination has increased very rapidly over the last 10 years or so. In 2008, we were producing 140 MCM per year of seawater desalination for potable water consumption, and we more than doubled that very rapidly in less than 10 years. From 2008 to 2013, went from 140 to 495 MCM per year, and today we are at 585 MCM per year, which is helping us to meet the water supply needs in our domestic sector. And so what you can see is that in the year 2020, we are very much in a balance. We are not actually running a deficit because we are not dependent on the natural resources as we once were. And in actual fact, in the year 2020, we had a slight surplus. Our total water resources were 2,375 MCM per year. And our demand was just under that. So we were running a little bit of a surplus, as you can see there in the bottom line. And compare where we were in the year 2020 to where we were in the year 2008, where we had something like a 500 MCM deficit. And what's turning us from a deficit to a surplus is the rapid increase in desalination, as you see there in the slide as well. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, how does Israel manage its water management? How has Israel been able to rapidly develop a very sophisticated sector in non-conventional water in terms of desalination and wastewater reuse? This is because Israeli water management is extremely centralized and operates from a national governmental perspective. So water decisions are from our Ministry of Infrastructure, Energy and Water. We have a water regulator who is appointed by the government. This regulator is not a politician. This regulator is a water expert. And he or she's job is to operate and manage the Israel Water Authority to meet the needs of our consumers on the left there, as you can see. And the supply to our consumers is managed through our national water utility, which is called Mokorot. And the national water utility provides water directly to regional and municipal water utilities that then supply the water directly to the public. Okay, next slide. This is a slide that shows our national water network. Israel is unique in the world that its water infrastructure operates at a national level. In many countries around the world, water management and water infrastructure is much more decentralized. But what you see here is our national water system that connects all of our water supply. The Sea of Galilee in the north, the lateral lines there are our networks that connect to groundwater systems, and you can also see along the Mediterranean coast the seawater desalination system. So we are able to very efficiently move water from place to place and to use different water supplies. So it could be fresh water from the Sea of Galilee, it could be groundwater, or it could be seawater desalination. We are able to efficiently move those water sources around, and we can rely on one or another depending on, or we can increase our reliance on one or another depending on the climatic conditions. So for example, if we have a very good rainy season, as we actually did have to some degree this year, it wasn't a bad rainy season, not fantastic, but it wasn't bad. But for example, if our Sea of Galilee is full, or the water levels of the Sea of Galilee are high, then we can pump more out of the Sea of Galilee and reduce our production of desalination, because of course desalination is much more expensive than pumping fresh water from a reservoir. The same thing with groundwater. If our recharge of our groundwater is good because we've had good rainfall, we can pump more from our aquifers and desalinate less or pump less from our surface water reservoirs. So we're able to do this because all of our water systems are connected through one water network that is managed as a national infrastructure. Okay, next slide, please. This is just a cross-section of what I was just saying, where we are able to draw from the different water sources. So we have our Sea of Galilee system, we have our groundwater, and we have our desalination, all being distributed through one network. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when we embarked on the national water carrier, actually this goes back to the mid-1960s. The Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret, became our national reservoir, and we developed a nationwide network of pipes and pumps with some challenging engineering at that time. We had to pump water from about 200 meters below sea level to more than 151 meters above sea level, because the Sea of Galilee is more than 200 meters below sea level. One of the challenges of our national water carrier system was when we converted the Kinneret to a reservoir, we began to see a reduction of flow into the lower Jordan River and the Dead Sea. So one of the challenges that we face today in the 21st century is how do we manage our water management supply for people, at the same time, how are we able to restore the Jordan River and Dead Sea Basin at the same time. Okay, next slide. This is an important slide because this sort of shows the decision making that took place in launching seawater desalination in Israel. So for years, we were only dependent, like most countries around the world, on fresh water. And you can see here the variability in water supply from Lake Kinneret from 1990 to the year 2002. Now, those red lines are lines that were set by the government preventing, or at least saying, that we should not pump water below the red line, because pumping below the red line would increase the risk of a reduction of water quality in the Kinneret, mostly through algal growth and increased salinity. So it was very important to try to minimize those kinds of problems by controlling the amount of water we would pump out of the lake. And these red lines were set by our water authority. And you can see that for a long period of time within the slide, we had the red line set at 213 meters below sea level. But in the late 1990s, Israel was entering into a very, very critical drought. The water levels of the Kinneret were dropping significantly, and we had no other choice but to lower the red line, run the risk of decreasing water quality in the lake, because we had no other solution. We simply could not afford to not stop pumping because we had no other water resources at that time. And you can see by the year 2002, we were in a very, very critical situation. The water levels were very low, and we basically actually sort of abandoned the red line. We were already pumping at minus 260 meters below sea level. And it was this crisis that led to Israel making the decision that it simply wasn't feasible to continue to simply rely on these natural water supplies, and we have to therefore find alternatives. And so our first seawater desalination plant came online in the southern city of Ashkelon in the year 2005 as a response to what we were facing due to these very critical issues of declining water levels due to drought conditions. And so this was the turning point, in essence, from Israel being sort of at the mercy of natural systems to now, as what you just saw earlier, as actually being able to run a surplus of water, even though, of course, drought conditions have not gone away. If anything, drought conditions are becoming even more extreme over time. Okay, next slide, please. So this is actually showing you what's happening right now, more or less. The water levels of the Kinneret in 2017 were, once again, very low, at about 213 meters below sea level. Next slide. And here you can see that in the year 2019, we had a relatively good rainy season and the water levels recovered and were above what we call the lower red line to about 211 meters per 211 meters below sea level. However, the point is that it doesn't matter as much as it once did whether the water levels drop below the lower red line or not, because in the year 2017 and the year 2019, like the previous years, we are no longer completely dependent on these water sources because we have the desalination facilities that allow us to become less dependent on this variability of fluctuations in the lake. Okay, next slide. This is just showing you our challenges with respect to the Dead Sea, and we have to find ways to figure out a way to rehabilitate the Dead Sea Basin. It's one of our biggest environmental challenges, not just for Israel, but for Jordan, that's on the eastern border of the Dead Sea, and also for the Palestinians in the West Bank. Here you can see that the water levels of the Dead Sea are declining at a very worrying drop of at least 1 meter every year. And the outcome of these declining water levels is what you see in the picture here. Sinkholes are opening up all around the Dead Sea, and these sinkholes are a huge risk to infrastructure around the Dead Sea basin. Okay, next slide. Salt concentrations in aquifers, as I mentioned earlier, coastal aquifer system is very sensitive to seawater intrusion. This is a big problem that is being faced by the Palestinians in Gaza. You can see that salinity in the mountain aquifer is relatively stable, so long as we maintain our pumping with the recharge. Water quality in the mountain aquifer is actually very good. Next slide. Here you see the variability of the water supply between the years 1989 and 2014 with respect to the coastal aquifer. You can see where we had very good years and we had less good years from different sources along the coastal aquifer. Again, showing you the challenges of variability and uncertainty with respect to natural water supply. Next slide. Similar pattern for the mountain aquifer system. Next slide. Okay, so desalination. So in the mid-1990s, there was an attempt to begin to introduce pilot desalination projects. These were rejected by the decision makers primarily due to the cost of desalination at that time. But as I said to you earlier, it was the 1999, 2001, 2002 drought that led to desalination being accepted by individuals, especially when the cost of desalination was shown to be around 50 to 60 US cents per cubic meter. This made the economics of large-scale seawater desalination attractive for the Israeli government. This reduced, although it did not, sorry, go back. This reduced but did not invalidate the Ministry of Finance arguments, which is primarily based on the fact that desalination is always going to be the most expensive water that we can provide. So it was clear that bringing desalination online was going to come at an economic cost, and that this meant that the price of water, the water tariffs, were expected to rise somewhat to cover the cost of desalination. Next slide. Right, this is just showing you the distribution. So as I said earlier, we have our national water network. What you see here on the left are all our the different desalination plants that are currently operational in Israel. We operate 5 reverse osmosis seawater desalination plants along the Mediterranean, and we also have desalination at the Red Sea for the city of Eilat as well. Okay, next slide. Here you can see those desalination facilities in a little bit more detail in terms of when they came online and the amount of water each one is producing. So our latest or our most recent desalination facility is in Sorek, which is near Tel Aviv. It's our largest desalination facility at 150 million cubic meters of water per year capacity for production, and came online in the year 2013. We're now actually in discussion for a 6 desalination unit that will be installed somewhere in the north of the country to help water supply in the Haifa area and the Galilee as well. So as you can see here, by the year 2014, desalination plants were supplying 70% of the domestic water consumption. That's already gone up to close to 80% in the year 2021. Next slide, please. Now, of course, with desalination on any kind of infrastructure, there are both good sides and bad sides. On the good, desalination is clearly, I think I've proven that point up until now, but the presentation has reduced our stress on natural supplies. It can enable environmental flows and therefore rehabilitation of systems if we're no longer pumping water out of our lakes or our aquifers. And of course, you can provide water on demand. So it reduces the need for storage, so less infrastructure for reservoirs. And of course, with reservoirs, you always are losing water via evaporation. But there are also challenges. Desalination is a very energy intensive process. And all of our desalination plants are running on fossil fuels, primarily natural gas. So the energy side of desalination is a very critical one and has to be closely managed and considered, what we call the so-called water energy nexus. The second point is the brine disposal at sea. We are discharging the brine, which is the wastewater product coming out of desalination, into the Mediterranean. And that brine discharge has to be very closely monitored to prevent any kind of environmental damage to the oceans, to the sea, excuse me, to the Mediterranean. And all of our brine discharge is monitored on a daily basis by the Ministry of Environmental Protection in Israel. The third is impact on coastal and environmental real estate. The point here is that Israel is a small country with a small coastline. And we have to be very careful to minimize any kind of damage to our coastlines and balance the need for land resources for desalination versus the need to protect our coastlines, to make sure that the public continues to have access to public spaces and beaches. And of course, the other needs for real estate along the coastline, such as hotels, nature reserves, beaches, and so forth. Power plants as well. Okay, go next slide. This is just a shot showing you the Ashkelon facility in Israel South. So you can see here basically the footprint of the facility. In actual fact, in Ashkelon, it's 2 plants running simultaneously, each producing about 50 cubic meters of water. Now it's a little bit more from pumping water from the Mediterranean. Okay, next slide. This is basically what you see inside the facility. It's not very exciting maybe, but basically what you see is just racks and racks and racks of membranes. Back in the year 2005, Ashkelon was the world's largest desalination plant. Today, if I'm not mistaken, it's Sorek, which is the largest plant. And Ashkelon on its own is providing around 13 to 14% of the domestic water needs in Israel. Okay, next slide. What's important in this slide is, again, re-emphasize the point that I said earlier, well, this idea of decoupling, meaning that you can see here in 2010 versus 2014. In 2010, we were still somewhat dependent on natural water supplies. And then you can see with the rapid increase of desalination in the year 2014, in 2010, it was 377 MCM per year. It went up to 600 in 2014. And this again allows us to become less dependent on the unpredictability of natural water supplies. So here we see, as it says, in 2015, 65 to 80% of the drinking water in Israel is supplied by desalination. Next slide. This is just going back to some of the challenges. You can see here the rapid decline of the Dead Sea on the top, the variability of water levels in the Kinneret, and how things change from relying on natural water systems to desalination from the year 2005 up until the year, in this case, 2016. Next slide. Okay, let's talk a little bit about wastewater treatment and reuse, because this is another very, very important element to our water management strategy. So what we do in Israel is we have in all of our urban centers centralized wastewater treatment plants managed by the regional authorities, but again supervised by the government. And we collect the sewage. In this case, what you're seeing here is from the center of the country, the Dan area, the Greater Tel Aviv region, which is about 3 million people. We collect that sewage and we send it for treatment to what is called a tertiary level, which is getting the water very close to drinking water quality. We then inject that treated wastewater into the aquifer via infiltration fields. This aquifer recharge improves the water quality even further by the treated effluent being mixed with the groundwater. And then we send that water via various pipelines and networks to the south of the country, where the water is used, is pumped out into local reservoirs, and then is used for farming in the desert areas of the Negev. Okay, next slide. One concern with the replacement of effluent treated wastewater with fresh water was that farmers were concerned that actually this would impact negatively crop production. But as you can see, over time, agricultural efficiency in Israel and crop production has actually increased, even though we have begun to replace fresh water with treated waste. In other words, we, at the same time as we changed the water quality for agriculture, we also worked very hard to adapt our crops and our farming methods so that the crops were able to grow without any kind of ecological or biological impact to the fact that they were now being irrigated with treated wastewater and not with fresh water. Next slide. This is more or less what's happening. You can see here in the agricultural sector that fresh water is gradually being reduced, and by the year 2050, only about 26% of our agricultural production will be irrigated with fresh water. We expect to have about 67% of our agriculture being irrigated with effluent, and then some percentage also with brackish groundwater. Next slide. This is where Israel is in wastewater treatment and effluent reclamation compared to other countries in the world. So we are today leading the world in wastewater treatment and recycling for the agricultural sector. Wastewater reuse is certainly being implemented in many countries around the world. And I think Israel is a good example to show the rest of the world that it can be done. And I think that we're going to see increases all around the world as, again, water scarcity becomes a reality, to adopt, where possible, of course, wastewater treatment for agricultural production, whether it be our region, the Mediterranean, Europe, North America, and so on, Asia as well. Okay. Next slide. But just like with desalination, there are goods and bads with the use of effluent, and we need to be very aware of the challenges. So on the good side, just like with desalination, more water is produced, and this reduces our pressure on natural resources. Treating sewage and using it for agriculture means there's less impact of sewage inflows into the environment, rivers and the sea. Treated effluent for irrigation is a much cheaper option than using desalination for irrigation. In actual fact, nutrients in the effluent can be very beneficial for agriculture. It reduces standing water, so this could, again, help to control things like mosquito outbreaks and other potential diseases. In Israel, as I said, everything is highly centralized, so we have a very efficient way of doing this, and the health ministry regulates very, very closely and effectively the water quality of the effluent. And probably the most valuable side of effluent for a farmer is, unlike rainfall, with treated wastewater, you have a constant, reliable supply of water for irrigation. So you can irrigate year-round if needed. On the downside, possible microorganism contamination in crops, hormonal impact on consumers. What we're dealing with here is what's called contaminants of emerging concern. The fact is that we do know that there are problematic elements in wastewater, such as pharmaceuticals, and we need to determine whether or not those pharmaceuticals are being compounds are being removed from the wastewater, or whether they are still being found in concentrations in the effluent. So the so-called CECs is a very important area of research that we're focusing on. There could be unknown residual impact on soil and groundwater. And because we use reservoirs for storing the effluent, there is an issue of evaporation, and whether or not we have the ability to reduce evaporative losses of the storage lagoons for our effluent. Next slide. Okay, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is my last slide in the presentation. So looking into the future, Israel has to think about water allocation between itself and her neighbors. We have to think about the growing use of water for anthropogenic uses, for nature, and probably one of our biggest challenges is we have to find effective means to rehabilitate and restore the Dead Sea and the Lower Jordan River. Second point is the extent of new water and who is to pay for new desalination facilities. So the economic aspect here for all of this infrastructure that we brought into our water sector is very important. Third, water sources divisions. Again, finding the best way to do all of these allocations from freshwater resources and non-conventional water resources. Efficiency measures. This is talking about conservation and promoting water demand amongst the public, so that per capita water demand can be reduced as much as is possible. And finally, of course, mostly with respect to effluent, measures to ensure water quality for agriculture. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. I hope I wasn't too long. And
thank you, Clive.
So
thank you, Clive, very much for your very interesting presentation and the information that you share with us from Israel technology and about all of this water technology. I would like to continue with the next presenter from the Water Board of Nicosia. I think is a representative of Mr. Konstantinos Parmaklis, George Dimitriou. Hello, George. Nice to have you here. The floor is yours, please.
Hello, everybody. Dear colleagues of Serides and Watershed, thank you for the honor to invite the Water Board of Nicosia to present our views and actions in this event for the announcement of the creation of the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean Regional Hub. We wish to succeed in this effort to enhance and facilitate collaboration and exchange of ideas on critical areas, including safety and health, critical infrastructure protection, health and water, and more other. The Water Board of Nicosia supports your effort. In this presentation, we will discuss about the World Water Day and what the Water Board of Nicosia is doing. Today, and every 22nd of March, we celebrate the Water Day. This day was formally proposed for the first time in the Agenda 21 of the 1992 Conference of the United Nations on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro. In December 1992, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution by which the 22nd of March every year is declared World Day for Water. What is the World Day for Water? It is an international observance day. Its intention is to inspire people around the world to learn more about water-related issues and to take action to make a difference. You may ask, Is this celebration necessary? Let's see some facts and data about water. As WHO declared in 2008, water is perhaps the most important natural resource. Out of the 1,400 million cubic kilometers of water on Earth, less than 1% is accessible. 17% of the Earth's population has no access to water. 42% of the world's population lives in poor hygiene conditions. More than 1.7 billion people live in catchment areas where water consumption exceeds supply. In 2025, the Earth's population will be 10 billion. 1 in 3 inhabitants are expected to either live in water scarcity or be directly at risk from it. Soon, we reach 2025, and the situation has not changed dramatically. Today, water is under extreme threat from the growing population, the increasing demands of agriculture and industry, the worsening impacts of climate change on water supplies, the aging and security of infrastructures, pollution and toxic materials in water sources, etc. At the same time, more than 1/3 of the world's drinking water is lost due to leakage from urban water supply systems. 90% of the leaks are invisible and need to locate and repair them. The quantity could feed millions of people. A better water loss management is a must. We need to value water at its real dimensions in all worldwide and local challenges to succeed achieving Standard Development Goal 6, that is water and sanitation for all by 2030. We share the same goals, but the challenges are not the same in all the countries. For example, we may have shortage of fresh water either due to droughts or due to floods, and we need to protect it. In Cyprus, we have subtropical, semi-arid climate, a declining precipitation, increasing temperatures, increased demand, urbanization, and scarcity of water. The infrastructure is aged and needs replacement. Many small water utilities, mostly those in rural communities, present increased water losses of the order of 25 to 50%, maybe more, as they have limited knowledge, staff, and skills to manage water supply systems. So yes, celebration is necessary because World Water Day raises awareness of the billions of people living without access to safe water. Each year, the United Nations chooses a theme for campaign or recommendation to highlight the importance of water. For the day itself, the United Nations released a World Water Development Report that is focusing on the same topic as the campaign, and is recommending a policy direction to decision makers. Starting from 2014 to 2020, we had the themes water and energy, water and sustainable development, water and jobs, water and waste, nature for water, leaving no one behind, and water and climate change. Refreshing our memory for the themes some years earlier, we had in 2002 water for development and in 2003 water for future. Consider how we improved these years. It is nice to guess what could be the theme of 2022, since personally I believe that valuing water covers all the issues related to water. Let us see. Maybe it will move to water and artificial intelligence. This year, due to the pandemic, the World Water Day is celebrated in online events. UN calls for action to tackle the global water crisis and support the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 6. The theme of World Water Day 2021 is valuing water. It is the value that each one gives to water. It is the role that water has for each one of us beyond pricing issues, and it includes the environmental, the social, and cultural value that people place on water. With the use of social media from now until the end of December 2021, not necessarily stopping after that, people around the world are invited to gather opinions and comments about water and what it means to them. So to understand how people value water economically, socially, culturally, or in other ways, and how it plays a role in our lives. The message that the UN is sending with the choice of this theme is that each one of us must consider that water has a huge multidimensional value for our households, food, culture, health, education, financials, and for the integrity of our natural environment. If we overlook any of these values, we risk mismanaging this valuable and irreplaceable resource, canceling the effort to achieve SDG 6. Therefore, we will not be able to protect this good for the benefit of everyone. We may notice that water can mean different things to different people, or has different importance to our home and family life, our livelihood, our cultural practices, our well-being, or our local environment. In households, schools, and workplaces, water can mean health, hygiene, dignity, and productivity. In cultural, religious, and spiritual places, water can mean a connection with creation, community, and oneself. In natural spaces, water can mean peace, harmony, and preservation. By recording and celebrating all the different ways that water benefits our lives, we can value water properly and safeguard it effectively for everyone. What we do to mitigate the impact of the threats on water? For the Water Board of Nicosia, valuing water is not a campaign of today or of this year only. It is the tool for continuous action, for continuous improvement. The Water Board of Nicosia is a semi-governmental, non-profit-making organization charged with the responsibility of supplying good quality and adequate quantity of fresh water to the town of Nicosia and its suburbs at an affordable price. We supply water about 20 million cubic meters per year to about 300,000 inhabitants. That is about 1/3 of Cyprus' population. The success of any organization presupposes the existence of a financially healthy and well-structured organization. The biggest issue in water management is the losses of water, that means losses of revenues, pressure on water reserves, increased cost of operation, increase in supplies and in energy consumed, increase in risk in quality of water, etc. Failure to control losses contributes to postponement of investments to improve the infrastructure and methods of work and to introduce proactive corrective measures. The Water Board of Nicosia considers that water losses in water supply networks are a water resource to be exploited. Therefore, a wise water management is a must to optimize the operation of the water distribution system. Apart from celebrating each year the World Water Day, the Water Board of Nicosia believes in the exchange of knowledge. We regularly organize workshops and seminars to share experience and best practices in water management, as it is the water losses management. We communicate with our customers and stakeholders to keep people aware of the value of water and the need to protect it. We adopt innovation policy. We are proud that we pioneer the introduction and testing of innovative technologies with pilot cases such as modern network telemetry and automated water meter reading systems, online water quality monitoring, power generators using water supply, and smart pressure reducing valves. The Water Port of Nicosia introduces smart metering in the old city of Nicosia in cooperation and coordination with the municipality of Nicosia as a smart city. In parallel, we will install 200 smart leak detectors using NB-IoT technology. We continue with a 10-year plan and 10 million euros to cover all the network with an AMR system. The Water Port of Nicosia proceeds with the restructuring of the organization. This will improve our ability to cope with the challenges of the present and the future needs in new technologies and in adoption of best practices that comply with our own conditions and financial capabilities. We introduced the digitization of water billing accounts. We massively update consumer data and obtain authorization to send invoices via email, thus having immediate and more frequent communication with our customers to keep them informed. We increase water storage capacity to provide for future needs and improve availability of water up to 48 hours in the event of an emergency or water outage. We target to interconnect all piping to solve the overall problem of water adequacy to the entire capital and surroundings. We construct new suitable office facilities for the relocation of the technical and labor staff to improve their speed of action. The Water Port of Nicosia actively participates in the preparation and review of the report for the national measures to adapt to the climate change strategy and action plan. Also, as a member of the European Federation of National Associations of Water Services, we actively participate in preparing and promoting position papers on critical water issues. Closing, we wish to Ceres to succeed as a Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean regional hub. We consider that it is for the benefit of Cyprus to build a learning network and strong relations between the state authorities, the research organizations, and universities, and to have a common platform of technology and equipment used and to suggest a solution that will add value to our everyday water business. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, George, for your nice presentations and all the presenters. Now, I think it's time to proceed with the roundtable. So please, all the presenters to open their cameras. So please let me know if you have any questions between among the presenters, if you want to ask, or from the audience. Please write up, and I will in the chat room, and I will be very happy to transfer the questions to our amazing presenters.
Christo, if I can, I don't have a question, but I have a, I have been amazed today with what I have been listening, because for many reasons. First of all, I see the willingness from all the parties that are here today to try to establish something that obviously it is not going to be established in a day. This is just the beginning, and I think this is just a kickoff for a fruitful collaboration to come. So there is plenty of time and opportunities here. I'm amazed to see the work that is being done by Arava Institute in Israel, especially considering also the fact that I have visited Israel, and I have a view of what Clive has been saying, and the fact that more or less what we have been saying during the pandemic as well, that a crisis can be an opportunity as well. So I think we have, although it is very early days, and we are here to facilitate it as Serides from European University Cyprus. What we will try to do is we will try to become a focal point to engage various communities and various organizations into a constructive dialogue, and also capitalize on the amazing work that is being done by Watershed and Lydia especially. I think there is a lot of room for improvement, at least in our country. Although, as George said a few minutes ago, a very big start has been already been in place. But I am very much pleased with what I listened today. And I would like to thank wholeheartedly Lydia, first of all, George, Clive, and we look forward. I'm not. This is not a closing remark, but I just want to express my mind that this is just the beginning, and we look forward to organizing more of this during the year. Hopefully, at least 3 or 4 times every year, with either the people that are here today, or we can add also new actors from the area. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will always be present in the best cases, because it is important also to know what are the challenges as well. And we will try to populate this regional hub with actors from the region.
I would like also to add, George, to very nice comments that I hope to this collaboration, as I mentioned before, it is a new effort from Serides and the Watershed here in Cyprus. So we want all the people here to contribute from his side, and universities and stakeholders and people from other organizations will be very happy. And also, like countries such as Israel, for instance, Clive, he has presented amazing work today, a lot of technology. And Clive, I would like to ask you, how is possible, I mean, here in Cyprus, how we can accumulate this knowledge, how you can help us, to and sharing this knowledge, and I don't know, with find some ways, at least at the EUC or any other universities here in Cyprus to collaborate and establish this new technology. Because here in Cyprus, we are also a small country and we have similar problems with water sources.
Thank you, Christos. Look, I think that I want to also share what George said. I think through the Water Hub, we have excellent opportunities for cooperation. I mean, it's the only way we can deal with our water challenges, is to do it cooperatively. I think that I'm not quite sure how Cyprus manages its water, but I know that there is desalination in Cyprus, and I think I'm aware that there are a lot of Israeli desalination companies that operate in Cyprus. So we should promote and support those efforts. One thing with desalination, especially large-scale desalination, it's really something that the government needs to be supportive of. So again, this is something that if the Cyprus government supports, then we can find ways to work together through government-to-government programs specifically on desalination, because that's large-scale infrastructure. On treated wastewater and the management of effluent in irrigation, there's a lot that we can do on a research side, cooperatively between our institutions and other research institutions. One of my work at the Arava Institute is actually how to address the challenges of small scale farmers. So most of the effluent that is being provided in Israel is to large, well-established farms, but we also have many small farmers throughout our area, and the question is, how do we provide the effluent to them, and how do we benefit small farmers, which have they lack the capability or the capacity of large industrialized or commercial farms. So effluent reuse at a smaller community scale farming, I think, would be something that we could start to come to some kind of cooperative programs between Cyprus and Israel. That could be an area of interesting research for us.
Thank you very much, Clive, for your nice answers to my questions. And also, I would like also to pass to George Dimitriou. George, could you please let us know? I mean, you also follow the presentation from the presentation by Clive. I would like to know your opinion about how we can use this technology, how we can share and also our experience here in Cyprus with Israel, and how we can benefit both of us from this collaboration.
Okay, before I proceed to say that we always borrow technology from Israel. We are cooperating continuously. I would like to say that what I like more from the presentation of Clive is that he said that the water regulator is not a politician. It's a water expert, and I keep this. So we have some room in front of us to manage things better. Yes, we use technology from Israel. We have a lot of instruments, a lot of equipment that we buy from Israel. And okay, they are very advanced in their water management.
Okay, thank you, George. And Livia, I would like to share your ideas here again and your amazing opinion, as always, to all these nice presentations.
Well, actually, the presentation by Clive and also what George said, George Dimitriou, I mean, says is an answer why we need the regional hubs. Because all the countries in Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East share one problem in common: water scarcity. And this is not going to go away. And as someone said, also, it's not a matter for politicians. Because no matter which government is in power, no matter whether the governments change from elections, the problem remains. And it's a central and I would say a time resistance and not changing policies. It's a matter of policies, as Clive said. It's a matter also of technology. I think it's a holistic approach. We heard in the presentation that in order to face water scarcity, it was not just one-sided approach. It was not just desalination. It was not just irrigation practices. It was all of them. And it's also changing the mindset, because the farmers need to be convinced, and a lot of other problems have to be faced in a holistic approach, in a systemic approach, in order to succeed. So that's what I'm taking away. The reason for the regional hub, that we have common problems, we have common challenges, and we need to face it together. And also that water scarcity and the management of water security in the global social sense is a matter for all of us that will not go away.
Thank you very much.
If I can add something
Yes,
to
please,
that,
George.
first, I think, I have been thinking in the last few minutes, we are a typical Middle Eastern and Southeastern Mediterranean hub. We were aiming for an 11 o'clock finish. It is already 11:24. So I think, like we are keeping the tradition in the best possible way.
Yes, we were a little bit out of our schedule, but I think it was good for us because we have the chance to see different aspects of technology, especially from Israel, and the presentation of Clive was very informative. And to be honest, for me, as a chemical engineer, and I think George also, we remember many things from our curriculum. And to be honest, it was really nice, to start again to remember this knowledge and wastewater treatment. I remember many things from your presentation, Clive, and this is something wonderful. I don't know if our audience has any questions. Otherwise, I don't want to keep the session more. Please let us know right up in the chat room if you have any question, so I can transfer to our nice and very kind presenters. Otherwise, we can just close and close the session by say some last few words. Okay. Okay, George, I don't see any questions right now from audience, so please let's start our closing part of our session. Please, I will start with you.
Thank you very much to everyone. We look forward to having many more of this. This is just the beginning. I think it was a successful beginning because we had the best possible lineup of speakers today. And yeah, what like they say, like in the movies, watch this space. Thank you.
Thank you. Clive, something from you, please.
Well, I want to highlight what Lydia was saying. I very much agree with her, and I think that's I'm looking forward to the future opportunities of us to work together and also to bring in other countries and partners. Work together on a joint regional strategy moving forward. I think great, but with Israel and Cyprus, and I look forward to additional opportunities. Hopefully, some of them will actually be done in person post Corona. So I just want to say from my side, thank you so much for the whole. Putting them out, and I look forward to many more opportunities of working together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Clive, that you are key presenter opening our first webinar here as a hub in Cyprus of Watershed. And now we'll go to George Dimitriou. Few words, George.
Yeah, it is our pleasure to see this hub being created. It will be our dream to see the creation of a common platform that we can, where we can share experience and knowledge, so we can all together work to have a better water management.
And finally, to our lovely Lydia.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very, very happy to be on the first webinar of this regional hub. And to answer George Dimitriou's question, the platform for sharing, I mean, we can always shape it better, but it is already there. It's the website of Watershed, which exists for many years. We have Lisa and Rinsky who are managing it. And whatever you want to share, any news, any other experience, we're very happy to host it in this platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lydia. Also, to add to George's comments, Dimitriou, George, we also here in Serides will be very, very happy to help to connect with Watershed and the people and members of Watershed for any future collaboration, and also to help with the platform or any new events or any announcements that you want to do. We'll be very happy. And finally, I would like to thank all the people that presented here in the first webinar as a regional hub in Cyprus. Thank you all for your passion and your time, and I wish you a happy evening. Okay? Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.